Okay, welcome everybody to the second meeting of the ANC3C Environmental Justice Committee. This meeting is going to be dedicated to the topic of composting. And before we get to the discussion with Rachel Manning, we have a little time for announcements. We now have, in addition to the ANC3C commissioners who are de facto members of the committee, we have two community members who have since joined, who've been approved voted on in our monthly meetings. They're both here too this evening, Laura Moore and Madeleine Gauthier. If anybody else out there is interested in joining as a committee member, again, it's open to anyone in the community. You just have to live in our ANC. Send me a note or get in touch with your commissioner, and we can start that process. If you know anyone else who might be interested in joining, please also get in touch. We're happy to have as many people participate as possible and have as many diverse perspectives as we can on our committee. Okay, so our guest this evening is Rachel Manning. I met Rachel, I guess about a month or two ago at the ANC4B Earth Day Fair that was put on over in Tacoma. And we met there, and I invited her to come and speak about the district's composting program. Rachel's also involved specifically in the pilot program that just launched for single-family homes. So I understand Rachel will speak a little bit about that in her presentation as well. Rachel's had a little problem with her video, so I think she's gonna stay off camera. But her slides are up on the screen, and Rachel's okay if I turn it over to you?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Warwick. And thank you all for having me. And very, very excited to be sharing some information about not just our curbside composting pilot program, but just the benefits of composting and food waste diversion, as well as some other food waste diversion programs that DPW offers. I am Rachel Manning. I'm a zero waste program analyst within DPW's Office of Waste Diversion. And before I dive in, I will just share a little bit about what is composting for those that might not be so literate on what it is. It is a process where microbes and fungi break down organic matter into a nutrient-rich soil amendment. And this soil amendment is what we call compost, which it looks and feels almost like a soil, but it's super, super dense and nutrient rich. And so what people would do is just mix it in with their topsoil or regular soil, and it could really create some really great fruits and veggies and plants. And so what I have here is a little cycle, which we borrowed from the city of Alexandria on the composting cycle. And so while our curbside program is providing access to composting, we do also want to encourage residents to follow the food recovery hierarchy from EPA here on the screen by reducing the amount of food that they generate, that they create, reuse food scraps as much as possible, and donate to friends and family, and then finally compost and of course, last resort, sent to landfill. And by diverting food waste from landfill and incineration, you're not just reducing your household's waste, but you're helping the district meet its zero waste goals of 80% waste diversion away from landfill and incineration. By diverting your food waste, it also prevents a production of methane, like food waste would if it were to be sent to landfill. And specifically for composting, compost, like I said, could be used as a soil amendment in farms and public spaces and in gardens. And diverting food waste away from your trash can also mitigate rodent activity if done properly. And finally, diverting your food waste can shed a light on how much food your household produces, which hopefully could lead to an adoption of food waste prevention techniques, and reduce our overall food waste in general. So currently, food waste makes up about 18% of the waste that single family households throw away in their trash. And through DPW's new curbside composting pilot program, we are hoping to capture this food waste and put it to better use. And so hopefully starting this summer, single family households will be provided that signed up will be provided with free weekly collection of food waste for 1 year, with the goal of expanding the service to all DPW serviced households. We opened up sign-up forms back in April 22nd to be more specific, and they close on May 26th. Over the course of that about 5 weeks or so, we received over 9,000 submissions. So we're very excited to be offering this service to that group of people. We are currently in the process of reviewing these submissions just to confirm their eligibility. And if selected, their households will be receiving an email no later than this Friday. So if you did sign up and you're waiting, thank you so much for your patience. It's taken a long time for us to just sort through everything and make sure we get everyone, get the right people on board. And before collection starts, I will note that we will be providing all the right equipment. We won't just, make people pay for their own bins. We did all the work to procure what we feel are the right equipment for this program. And we worked in collaboration with our colleagues in DC Health to get an understanding of what the best types of bins would be to reduce odor in order to mitigate rodents. And so that starter kit that each participating household will receive will include a 5-gallon curbside container, which you see here on the screen, the cute little set here in a graphic form, and as well as a 2-gallon-ish kitchen caddy, which can sit on your kitchen counter, under your kitchen sink, in your fridge, your freezer, whichever is most convenient for you to throw your food scraps in on a daily basis. And then we'll also be providing 100 compostable bags that will be used to line your kitchen caddy. If you wish. We also are open for folks to not use the compostable bags and just rinse out their kitchen caddy, or use paper bags instead. And this pilot program, we're hoping will, with this small group of folks that opted in voluntarily to this program, we can get a sense of any challenges and areas of improvement before it's offered to a larger group. So how exactly will it work? So you'll, if you're participating, you'll receive that starter kit as well as a welcome packet in the mail, which will detail collection instructions as well as best practices. And first, we will instruct participating households to line that kitchen caddy with the provided compostable bags, or like I said, throw your food scraps in loose or use a paper bag. And then once it's full, they can tie off that bag or just place the food scraps into their curbside container on their signed a collection day, and then place that curbside collection container at their designated collection point, which is where you would typically put your trash and recycling containers for pickup. So that's the front, back alley, or side alley on a once weekly basis. Then after that, our contractor will collect the food scraps from participating households and bring them to a processing facility where they will be turned into compost. And at the end of the pilot, we will be providing each participating household with 5 pounds of that finished compost to use at their home. And also here I have a list of materials that can and cannot be collected through this program. We wanted to make it easy for folks to scrape off everything off their plate after the meal. So we, as you might notice, have included meat, bones, and dairy products on this list, which is currently not items that we're accepting at our food waste drop-off program. And because it's a pilot program, we will be gathering and tracking a few data points to determine what an expanded rollout might look like. One of which is tonnage collected. So we'll be weighing all the food waste that we collect and tracking that. And with that, we'll be also tracking how much food waste goes to our food waste drop-offs and seeing if there is any shifting of that tonnage as well. We'll be tracking participation through set out rates. So this means what percentage of participating households are actually putting out their containers each week, as well as contamination rates. So we expect that there will likely be a bit of a learning curve for some folks, and therefore we are including acceptable items and not acceptable items as a little sticker on each container to make it easy to reference before items are placed in each container. And as a means to track contamination and to continue education, if several contaminants are spotted in a container, so like things like, a plastic fork or a plastic bag or, food serviceware that we're any other food serviceware that we're not collecting, or large bits of yard waste, we are going to have our collections crew look in that container and place a oops tag. So right here on the screen, I have a similar campaign that we did for recycling a couple years back. So it'll be a similar campaign, but sort of mirrored for composting, where it'll state that the contaminants are present, what they are, and sort of like a try again, like, oops, it's okay, like next time, here's what you did, and next time, this is what you can do to mitigate the issue. And when we conducted this education campaign for recycling back in 2021, we did see a large reduction in contamination, about 2/3 of a reduction. So we hope that if we start implementing this with the composting program, it'll really help people not only understand a lot better about what goes where, but also help us get cleaner loads to our composting facility. We'll also be using this pilot program to evaluate the processing capacity. So, how many composting facilities are in the area, and how much can they handle on a regular basis? Because one of the reasons why we're starting off with such a small group, out of the 105,000 households DPW services, is because there's currently not enough capacity in the region to process food waste from all those households. But our hope is through our pilot program and several other residential food waste programs popping up in the region, that capacity to process will grow as the tonnage of food waste that is collected expands. And again, because it is a pilot program and we want to learn as much as possible, we will be asking participants to take several surveys throughout the year to assess customer satisfaction and identify any areas of improvement. And again, what happens next will really depend on the lessons learned during this next year. We may need additional resources, different types of equipment like bins or liners, but our goal is to expand the service to all single-family households serviced by DPW, and we'll find out how during the pilot year. And I would be remiss if I did not bring up our other food waste diversion program, the food waste drop-off. I mentioned it briefly here and there throughout the rest of the presentation. If you did not sign up for the pilot program, or you are not eligible because you live in a multifamily building, you can still participate in this program. We have 12 food waste drop-off locations for residents to bring their food waste for composting across all 8 wards, and these occur at farmers markets on Saturdays and Sundays. And it's a highly popular program. And we expect there will be some shift of customers, from this program to the curbside program, and we'll be tracking like that I said. But just last year, to give you an idea of how popular it is, we diverted over 900,000 pounds of food waste. And so we're really excited to not only continue servicing these wards and through these markets, but also continue expanding this program. So not just because we're servicing single family homes with the curbside composting pilot program doesn't mean that this type of program will go away. We want to keep building and bolstering this program so we create access for as many people as possible to divert their food waste. And I'd like to conclude by just saying, addressing food waste is a large part of how we'll reach our zero waste goals, and we hope to continue working with the community to increase education, all of our programs and services related to food waste reduction and diversion. And thank you for having me. And at this time, I'd like to open up for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. That was a very helpful overview of the services currently offered, so the pilot program and the drop-offs. I'd like to start the Q&A with a couple of questions, if that's okay. And
sure.
Anybody else, if you'd like to put your hand up or send a question in the chat, we'll get to your questions as well. So you mentioned multifamily homes, and they are not included in the pilot program. Can you explain how that decision was reached, and if there are any plans going forward for a similar pilot program in multifamily homes?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we did not offer this service to multifamily households. One, because DPW is focused on servicing single family homes. So trash and recycling is only, we only collect from single family households, which are households with 3 units or less. Anything outside of that is considered multifamily commercial, and that's serviced by the private sector. And we know it's a big city with a lot of people that live in multifamily, and work flagged to me that there's a lot of people in this ward specifically too that live in multifamily. And we understand that this is something that a lot of people want, and we need to start small, and with a group that we are familiar with collecting from. And so that's definitely our start here. Our goal from here is to service all DPW service households and offer this service to them. However, like I said, we're not, we can't ignore the fact that there are tons of people that live in multifamily households that are not receiving this type of service for free, in terms of like city services. And so food waste drop-off is definitely an option there, but not as convenient. I know that for sure. We are developing our zero waste DC plan, which is our strategic initiative to reach 80% waste diversion. And it's not published yet, but we are doing everything that we can to plan for the future to increase not just recycling, but also composting accessibility across the district. So not just residents, but also the commercial sector as well. So something for the future, but we're starting small for right now.
Okay, thanks. That's a good segue to a question I received by email from someone who can't attend tonight, but you listed in your presentation the drop-off points, and some of them, I mean, most of them are seasonal. Do you know if there are any plans to expand either the number of collection points or keeping the ones that exist open throughout the year, even when the farmers markets aren't taking place during the winter or during the off season?
Yeah, great question. Again, we definitely realize that it's not ideal to have, we really, our goal is to have all year round food-based drop-off collections. What we're really, the problem there is we're tied to the farmers market schedule on a lot of these. I can't say exactly what will happen next, but I will say that we are hoping to ensure that all of these food waste drop-offs are occurring year round. And our aim is to increase by 2 every year. So adding 2 food-based drop-offs across the city each year.
You mean adding 2 that are open year round?
Yes, exactly. That would be the minimum. Yeah, like we wouldn't open new ones if they weren't year round. That's, that's our commitment going forward.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the only 2 that are open year round currently are DuPont Circle and the Palisades, because those farmers markets operate year round.
So we actually have so Columbia Heights, Mount Pleasant, Monroe Street, so that's Brooklyn, Eastern Market, Southwest Farmers Market, and over in Ward 7, the First Baptist Church of Deanwood. Those are all year round.
Oh, okay, I stand corrected. I realized.
No worries. And if folks want to look up those, I had them on the screen. Here we go again, if you want to look at them. And there's also a QR code in the link as well, if you want to look at them a little bit more closely with the addresses as well.
Okay. So I have a question that was submitted in the chat. I understand that our waste gets composted in Prince George's County. Who gets access to that compost? And if not in DC, can that change? I don't know the issues this person is saying, but yeah, so who actually, I understand that mean like who actually gets the compost after it's been processed?
So I will say we have not awarded the contractor for collections, hauling, and processing for this pilot program. For the curbside program, we contract out to food waste for the food waste drop-off program, and that's something that we don't provide out to the public at this point. But for the curbside composting pilot program, we're not certain of where the food waste will go, what processing facility in the region it'll go to. But at the end of that pilot program, participating households will receive 5 pounds of that finished compost.
Okay. Okay.
I think we do have a hand up too.
Oh, we do. Sorry, it's blocked by my chat window.
No worries.
Let's go to Madeleine.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Rachel, for this presentation. I have a couple of questions, if I may. First, I just saw that you said that you had about 9,000 submissions for the pilot program, and I think your goal was 12,000 to have about 1,500 per ward. I assume you're still compiling the data and where your missing households are, but do you have any idea of where why you lower than your goal, and what's your assessment of why that is? I have a couple of other questions too. I don't know if I should just ask all the questions or.
I can take that first one if you'd like. I shouldn't say it was a goal, but also it was our allotment, our maximum. And so because it's an opt-in program, we would think, it's great to get 12,000, but because it's voluntary, we expected there would probably be a little bit less. And so we did see overwhelming support in a lot of wards, and signups in a lot of wards. There were some that had lower signups, and we did do a lot of outreach with community organizations. But we did fall a little short in some words, but our hope is, because this is a pilot program, neighbors will reach out to other neighbors, and we'll get a better sense as we go forward to be a little bit more intentional with some of the some more community organizations as we start hiring up with more communication staff on our end, because that's somewhere we've been short-staffed for the last couple of years, and so you know, we are you know, going on strong with 9,000 or so folks, and we're really excited about that number, and we're really excited that the folks that did sign up will be able to receive this service and tell their neighbors about it, so in the future they can keep an eye out for any sorts of expansions.
Yeah, no, we are very excited too. So this is great. Yeah. And, you know, definitely look forward also to see a little bit of the distributions and you know, perhaps how it can, you know, help increase, you know, the you know, take on that. I have, yeah. So another questions, but that's probably a bigger question than, because it's beyond the pilot program. But I was looking at the report, the feasibility study, and some of the recommendations that came forward. I think so. It's some years old. It's 2017. So I'm sure a lot of things has happened in the meantime. In you know, like preventing you from really addressing some of the recommendations. But one thing that I thought was very interesting in this report was, well, in addition to recommending to have like how do you say, like a facility in the district, which I'm assuming is not happening. The other thing is they were really pushing for having both household scrap, you know, food scrap mixed with yard waste, that it really helps to, because I mean, it helps making better compost and all that, but it helps in many aspects of efficiency and you know, like, so the productivity of the, you know, sort of the cost component of it. So is that something that logistically was not possible to do? Or because I think this is also something that I think we are a little short in the district, is the yard waste component. So I don't know whether you can speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that we decided to just stick with food and not include yard waste is because of the size of the bin that we would have to provide. And when we're thinking about providing residents with a size of bin, oftentimes you kind of want to fill it. And with food waste specifically, we want people to sort of notice how much food waste are they generating. And we don't want to think, you know, if they have a size cart that's the same as like what your recycling cart is, to fill it up with food waste for folks that don't have yard waste or don't have the yard waste to compost at that moment. And so our thinking behind that was providing a bin that's large enough to provide space for food waste for a week, but not so large that people are thinking, I have so much space in this bin, let's keep filling it. And so that's one of our considerations there. That's not saying that we would consider including yard waste in that in the future, because this is something that we're testing out. We might be completely wrong, and people, you know, won't fill up their bins all the way, even though it's just 5 gallons, 5-gallon bucket, or people, you know, really might want that yard waste included in there. And so that's something that we'll assess throughout this pilot year. I will say that our yard waste program for DPW has changed in the last year. And so yard waste collection is now year round, and residents can call 311 or visit 311.dc.gov to make or schedule an appointment all year round for yard waste collection.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's interesting about the yard waste. I didn't know that, so thanks for sharing. So there's a question in the chat. This is a little bit more about actually using the service, but what happens if you use non-BPI certified compost bags? There are a lot of bags listed online that say they are compostable, but not many say that they are BPI certified. I know at the drop-off points, from using them myself, they do a pretty good job of flagging if the bag's not compostable before people throw it in the bin. But can you speak to that question? What happens if you do use a non-BPI certified bag?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly will have our contractor flag that as a contaminant because we want to ensure that whatever we're sending to our processing facility will break down completely and is made of plant-based material that is, gone through the rigorous testing process to adhere to those certifications, is free of harmful chemicals that, possibly, are maybe in the bags that are not certified by BPI. And so, yeah, we certainly, that would be treated as any other material that's not supposed to be in that compost bin.
So in terms of participating in the pilot program, they would get an OOPS tag.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
And at the drop-off points, they are flagged. I mean, I know like the ones that I've learned from the drop-off points to use and not to use, that they're a point of information on that too.
Yeah, they are definitely all of this contracted staff over there at the food waste drop-off sites are trained on this, and their purpose is to educate the public on what is supposed to go in the bin and what's not.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, Janelle, you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you so much for this presentation. And I'm really enjoying how much the community is really into zero waste. So I was wondering, like, if you guys had either already or were thinking about partnering or working with in any way the University of the District of Columbia and their Center for Urban Agriculture and Gardening Education, because I know that they're not only doing this out of their campus up here in Van Ness, but they have a few other sites in Ward 8 or Ward 7, Ward 5, and Ward 8, where they're actually like growing things too. So kind of like in an urban environment, and the whole full circle of getting to the zero waste, right, also involves the growing of the things with things that were potentially waste. In an urban environment in a sustainable farming way. Is that something that is an apple in somebody's eye, or are you already doing it?
We are not, that's not in the plan that we're in the short term. But that is definitely an interesting thought. We are thinking, as we're going, like you said, towards zero waste, what are those unique partnerships that we could make to, sort of close that loop and keep it local. I will say in terms of, I'm not sure how their processes are for composting, if they're composting on any of their sites. In terms of like the composting process, many like community composting sites don't accept bones, meat, or dairy. And typically those kinds of materials would only be composted at an industrial composting site. But in terms of like circularity of the like the soil, the compost itself, that's an interesting thought in terms of like keeping that local other than what we're providing to the participating households.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a potential option for folks that are in multifamily to be able to also participate in if we already have a center there and they're doing it, it just makes sense to expand it. I like to duplicate some efforts here whenever I can. But yeah, I think it would be cool to kind of look into that partnership. Thank you.
Definitely. Thanks for flagging.
So another question in the chat, and this is more general. So Rich doesn't have an answer. If anyone in the audience also has input on this or would like to share their experiences with using the composting services, please feel free. But is there a city that has been very successful with their program that we are trying to emulate?
Great question. I know that when we were researching this program, we spoke to the city of Boston. I had not checked in with them in a couple of months, but I know that they launched their program back about a year or so ago, but so they're fairly new as well. So that's something that we're interested in sort of learning from them as they go, as we start. So yeah, if there's anyone else that knows of great programs, I know there's certainly a lot in the West Coast, but every city is definitely unique.
Yeah, I was just going to
say. Also, sorry, we also want to look outside of the United States because that's usually where they.
Yes. Yeah. Great.
Someone else tried to speak there.
Yeah, sorry, this is Laura Moore. I was just going to say, I know from work I do that Portland, Oregon has had a long existing citywide composting operation. But that, like you said, there's lots on the West Coast, but and, you know, to the point that Janelle just made about looking internationally, certainly you can look in almost any European country and find scaled up versions.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and also Canada has a lot, you know, broader program, like is a lot more, and Montreal in particular, which I know a little bit more, has had a program for many years that, so I don't know exactly how it works and what are their challenge versus the potential challenge for DC, but they have, I know that recently expanded to multi-unit, you know, buildings to, you know, so all, I think the whole of Montreal is composting and all that. So, and even smaller towns are composting. So it would be interesting actually to look a little bit broader and to understand what are the specific challenges of DC that that may, you know, other cities don't have, but probably some other cities somewhere do have similar and have overcome some of these challenges.
Yeah, that's definitely great. I didn't know about Montreal. We have started looking at ones like Toronto. So I need to look into Montreal. I know we are currently starting to look at some cities and in terms of what their education and communication strategies are around the programs. And so as we do that, we'll also be reaching out to them to see how their programs are going and any challenges that they have.
Any other questions from the public or anybody would like to share about their experiences using the services?
I just wanted to echo Rourke's statement about the multifamily dwellings and what other people have said. I love using the farmers market, and I understand why you can't expand to the multifamily dwellings like ours right now, but I'm just thinking about elderly people and people with limited mobility in my building and how much harder it is for them to get to the farmers markets, especially during the winter and other times when the farmers markets in our ANC aren't open. And so I just hope deeply that we'll continue to expand it, because it would be wonderful to be able to divert that much waste from our large buildings as well.
Yeah, thank you. You're heard. Your voices are all heard. I personally live in a multifamily building. And so, you know, as someone who's leading this project, I deeply wish I was one to experience it as well. And so, you know, in the future, that's definitely something that we're thinking about.
And if you need people to pilot the apartment and condo and co-op, you know where to find us.
Heard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah.
Sure.
And well, kind of to echo that, I also live in a multifamily condo building, and we have an outside service that is a veteran-owned small business that does our composting. That's in each of our trash rooms on every floor, and it actually doesn't cost that much, but it's also a 177 unit building, so that's pretty spread out cost-wise for us. I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, but that's kind of what we've landed at as a solution for folks that want to do it right now that also can't make it up to the farmers market. I did have a question, but then I forgot it with giving that answer. and I will try and look up the company that we use. I believe it's Veterans Composting.
Yep, you're right about that. Veteran Compost.
Veteran Compost, yeah. They're very great, and yeah, and it's been very popular in my building.
How does that work in your building? Do they pick up? How often do they pick up?
So I believe when we first got it, like 3 or 4 years ago, could be longer, they were picking up only once a week, but it got more popular, and we only had the bins on like every other floor, but now they're on all 4 floors, and they, I think, pick up more than once a week, possibly twice a week. And they're not very big bins, so we didn't have to carve out new space.
Okay, I don't see any other questions.
I had one more.
Oh, okay, Laura, go ahead.
I don't have school-age children anymore. I don't know if DC district school, public schools are composting, but I raised my children in Vermont, and they had rather robust public school composting programs. It's another way to really get at large volumes of food waste. And it's really interesting how if you educate children when they grow up, they still want to continue doing what they learned in school. So I don't know if the city has considered that option either.
That's excellent.
I believe all DCPS schools do offer organics diversion, but I believe that was being phased in a couple years ago. So I'm not sure if the pandemic, if that affected anything. But I know there are several that are, I think, where we did the Ward 4 Earth Day event, Rurik. I think they compost, but I'm not sure. Yeah. There might be still that are some that are still doing it, if not all of them. But I know our friends at DGS, which manages the collection from DCPS, or Department of General Services, I'm speaking in acronyms, I'm sorry. Department of General Services manages the collection for DC public schools. And we could certainly look into that and provide some confirmation if you'd like.
Yeah, you mentioned commercial earlier, but what is the situation right now? Like if a restaurant, or do they have to do that privately if they wanted to start a composting program?
Yes. They would need to contract a private hauler for composting, food waste collection for composting.
And then what about our friends in the federal government and all the government buildings? Do you have any idea of kind of their involvement? Are they active in this as well, or?
I'm not entirely read in on the federal buildings in terms of organics diversion. But when we think about Zero Waste DC, that's not just district owned property or private. In here, we're also talking about federal as well, and cooperating and collaborating with those entities.
Okay, from the chat, can our speaker comment on how good citizens are with the drop-off program and adhering to the guidelines for what can be included? do you have any feedback from the compost cab who?
Yeah, so our contractor, AgriCity or Compost Cab, that's something that they are super read into, I'm sure. And my colleague, Christine McCoy, who manages that program on our side, would probably know a lot better than I do. But I think generally folks are pretty well read into what can and cannot be going to those bins. And like I said, we do have those contracted staff members there to watch out for anything that shouldn't go in the bin and educate folks on the fly.
And they're great, by the way. I would just add my
That's good to hear.
Always a delight to talk to and just to see every week, and I mean, consider them part of the community too, even if they don't live at their drop-off points. So I think those are really important relationships that they further in their work. So like you said, with education and doing a lot of community outreach in that way.
Yeah, definitely the relationships are key there. And we'll definitely see that a lot more as we expand curbside services and participation in certain volunteer programs, finding those champions in those communities, finding those people groups of people trust. Oftentimes it's hard to get through to some communities as government. And so we are being really intentional about looking out for who these community leaders are and educating them first. And so that way they can be champions for our programs.
Yeah, well, you can add us to your list. Committee here, and we have a lot of enthusiastic composters in our ANC. And and I mean, just even before I got involved in ANC, made it a priority to kind of help people out with it. I mean, we heard the point before that just accessibility to the drop-off points year-round, but also during the season, the weekly drop-off points at the farmers markets to lend your neighbors a hand and offer, if you're actively using the services and someone who might like to and can't make it to the drop-off themselves, to offer to take theirs too. It's just an open drop-off point. And that can divert more of the waste from the trash stream. Okay. Any last questions or points anybody would like to raise? So I think this is a good point where we can wrap up.
Rorik, you don't seem to see me.
Oh,
I have one more question.
Go ahead, Madeline.
Yeah, it's just, because we just heard about veteran composting. I was wondering, and I think there was discussions during the sort of, when you discussed with the DC about the program in the past couple of years. And I think, so we have both veteran composting and compost crew, I think, that are both, private services in the district. Is there any kind of plan to partner with them, or are they going to be part of the program, or are they just going to lose business as composting in the DC expands?
So when we launched this program, it is currently, it is all contracted out. So we will be using a compost or solid waste hauler, whoever bids or is awarded the contract. That's something that our Office of Contract and Procurement handles. So our program staff sort of stays out of that process. There's sort of a line there. And so for collecting the food waste, processing it, and hauling it to that processing facility and processing it, that was one contract that went out for any interested party to bid on it. And one contractor will be awarded that, and we have yet to hear who that will be. But our hope is that it will not cause a lot of a dip in revenue for these compost businesses. And as we build up our requirements for other entities like commercial businesses and large generators like big universities, big residential universities to compost, then they will sort of get business elsewhere in the commercial sector. There's a lot of opportunity there.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I see nothing new in the chat and no hands. So yeah, let me thank you, Rachel, for taking the time to speak with us this evening. This has been very insightful and helpful, and a good starting point, I think, for our committee and our ANC to talk about how else we can support the composting services and how we can get more folks involved. Yeah, I think on that note, thanks to everybody who joined us this evening. And our committee's still meeting kind of on an irregular basis, but I would like to talk with our other committee members soon about kind of mapping out what the rest of the year looks like to get some meeting dates set up with a little more regularity. Until we get to that point, just stay tuned and we'll plan and announce our next meeting as soon as that is ready. Great. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording and end the meeting. Have a good night. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.